Hi guys. So my overall opinion on this concept of whether or not libraries should try to remain neutral strongly mirrors David Linke, who is from the University of South Carolina LIS department. And his basic point is libraries don't need to be neutral. We don't need neutrality. What we need is advocates. We need advocates for high quality intellectual debate. We need advocates for growth mindset, for learning from each other, for democracy, for the inclusion, for inclusion and for equality, and for basic humanity. And we need advocates for the open exchange of good faith ideas by people who are talking about sincerely held beliefs in the proper setting. So that's the gist of what I believe as well. He says, don't try to be unbiased. Try to be honest about your bias. Try to be trustworthy. Try to be sincere and principled in what you're doing. And I think that all of those are higher values that are going to get us a lot closer to neutrality than some of the examples that we heard about and read about in this week's readings. As David Linke says, to be neutral right now, today in America, is to maintain the status quo. And the status quo is just not good enough. Jeffrey Howard was my favorite of all the speakers that we heard in the TED Talk. And he spoke about a lot of really important points about what open discourse means for democracy and how to have moral debates, how to disagree morally. Really appreciated all of those. But one of the things that he talked about was how in conversations like this, we actually oftentimes really can't even agree on the basic meaning of the word we're talking about. And in this case, of course, that word is neutrality. I think from what I can tell, when people do talk about wanting libraries to be neutral, I think they are in large part agreeing with James LaRue, who was one of the people who was discussed in the journal article that we read. So James LaRue had a pretty pragmatic definition of neutrality. He said basically that it means all people should get equal access to the resources, the technology, and the services of a library, regardless of their belief system. And additionally, all beliefs deserve equal representation in our materials, and that the best way to create a neutral collection is to have robust, welcome public oversight into the process. His basic point is everybody gets a seat at the table. Every idea deserves a seat at the table. I have a lot of problems with that mentality. Number one, I think it is criminally oversimplistic. The example that he gives, and I know this was just a short blurb about a longer speech that he made, but the example in the blurb is if you give Democrats a room to have a meeting at your library, then you also need to give Republicans a space to have a room. Well, I don't think anybody disagrees with that, and I don't think there's any debate over that. I think where the debate happens is if you give Black Lives Matter organization an opportunity to have a meeting space at your library room, do you also need to provide that same space for a group that's called Police Deserve the Right to Extrajudicially Shoot and Kill Black people when they feel threatened by them? I think that's a lot more complex. I think that it falls a lot more into the gray area that we're actually debating here, because it's easy to be neutral when you're talking about two reasonable and long accepted philosophies and groups of people. I think when you talk about fringe ideas and fringe people, that's where it's really difficult. And I don't think all fringe ideas and people deserve a seat at the table, which brings me to my other two problems with his argument. One of those is that the table's finite. We have funding issues. We don't have enough money to give everybody a seat at the table or to buy every book. And number two, if one person's existence at the table basically dehumanizes another person who's at the table, if one philosophy or idea is so repugnant or so antithetical to a different philosophy or idea that we're trying to make room for, then they can't both be at the table. At some point, there is going to be a choice. The choice to include one, by definition, excludes the other. There is no neutrality when you have a finite table. And Instead, I think we have to consider neutrality, but consider it in a different way. Trying to be neutral, I'm talking now about Jeff Howard again, trying to be neutral in a time where society is constantly pushing and striving forward again against inequality and against oppression. If you are trying to be neutral when all of society is trying to move forward, then you're actually a force for oppression, which is in itself not neutral. So am I arguing that we should silence any voice that we disagree with? Absolutely not. Of course not. Instead, I'm arguing that we should make a reasonable effort to hold space for all kinds of open discourse, even with ideas that we find repugnant, even with ideas that are beyond just disagreeable, but only in the proper setting. I don't think that the library's job is to give anybody a soapbox, but I think if we can create a setting where people who are ready and open to having this kind of difficult, grueling conversation can come together and have a critical and thoughtful debate, that's worthwhile. But I think we have to make sure that there are educational and meritorious value to what we're trying to accomplish. And just putting a gross book on the shelf or just offering a room to an organization that we know is filled with hate for some of our other members in our community doesn't meet those goals. I don't think we need bright line rules about whether we're neutral or how we define that term. I think obviously we need policies about collection management, and we need oversight from our population, but we are a profession filled with thoughtful, intelligent, educated people. And I think we can strive together to make the choices that are going to have to be made, right? Because somebody's going to have to be the arbiter. Somebody's going to have to make tough choices. And I think librarians are really capable of doing it. So no, I don't think that libraries should strive to be neutral. I think that libraries should strive to be fair, but only within reason. Thanks.